get through this.
Easy for listening. I was able to do it.
Easy for dancing.
I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to Have Your Say, one-on-one shadow boxing. Today my guest at WTV Studios, David Archibald. David Archibald, who calls himself as a newborn,
It'll do.
sometimes, a long time ago. Yes, and in the 21st century, do we need a Renaissance man?
Of course we do.
Why?
Well, we've got to get out of our little ruts and have a helicopter view of existence and feel everything and smell everything.
It's nice to see when people fly up in the sky and can feel the weather and the environment. So what's happening with our weather and with our climate?
In terms of climate,
Yes?
the bellwether is possibly the North Atlantic, which has been cooling for the last 10 years. And that's dropped in temperature over the top 700 metres of the water column by about 0.7 degrees centigrade. And that cooling trend looks like it's continuing. We've had a very weak solar cycle 24, which is about 80% over. We've got 2 or 3 years to go of that before we go to the next solar cycle. But which will also be possibly a lot weaker, which means that the climate will continue to cool for probably another 20 or 30 years.
I heard from people cooling is much worse than the heating up of the weather because we're facing with tremendous problems if the weather is cooling down. But apart from that, what we have to solve, how we heat when it's cooling down. Why people saying we're not cooling down, we are warming up?
Well, some people say they're warming up, but the satellite temperature record, which is the highest quality temperature record, says that temperatures have been rather flat for the last 30 years, including the global CIS area hasn't changed for 30 years.
So why the Greens are that adamant all around the world to say we're killing ourselves because man is causing the worst problem of life?
It starts with the collapse of communism in 1990. Prior to that, there was a belief system that a lot of the left and the Greens had. But after communism collapsed, they didn't have anything to believe in. And some people say there's
So that's a vacuum there. So it's a vacuum is...
vacuum has to be filled.
Yes.
And it'll be filled by any sort of rubbish that comes along.
And one is very handy.
And so the whole climate scare was invented as a belief system for the left, and for the Greens in particular, as a rationale for controlling society.
So not as a political movement, but as a controlling device.
Well, they're same sort
The
of.
same thing. Politics like control, and politicians like control. And if the people are not afraid at home, how the hell you can control them? So what is the past, present, and the future of our climate, and what sort of things we have to observe when we are thinking about climate of the Earth?
Okay, do you want a big picture?
Yes, please.
Big picture starts about 60 million years ago.
Yes.
The world was actually a lot warmer, and sea level was 70 metres higher than it is at the moment.
70.
70 metres. There weren't ice caps. And if Antarctica melted and Greenland, the sea level would rise by 70 metres. Now, Antarctica moved over by continental drift, plate tectonics, moved over the South Pole. It suddenly turned into a gigantic refrigerator.
So the south and west and the east is all changed, the magnetic
No, it's
thing?
nothing to do with magnetic. It
Nothing?
simply just drifted over the poles, drifted there, and instead of being open ocean, which absorbs 95% of the incident light, this became snow-covered rock and reflected 60%, reflected 90%. So suddenly a large chunk of the planet was reflecting light back to space instead of absorbing light.
Yeah.
So Antarctica turned into a gigantic refrigerator, and it took tens of millions of years for the oceans to cool down. But they cooled down, the bottom ocean cooled by about 10 degrees centigrade, from 14 degrees centigrade to 4 degrees centigrade. Over the whole of the bottom of the oceans, which is about 3,000 metres thick on average. Glaciers built up over, and the ice sheet built up over Antarctica. It's now 3,000 metres thick. And this refrigerator sits there. 3 million years ago, we went into ice ages. It got cold enough that we have these started out a 40,000 year cycle. Then about 1 million years ago, it turned into a 100,000 year cycle of glaciations and interglaciation. So right at the moment, we're in interglaciation called the Holocene. But 90% of the time, we're in a glaciation where it's a lot colder.
Which is cold, really cold.
Really cold. There's basically desert and savanna right up to the equator, and there'd be only a few little patches of rainforest left. That's 90% of the time. And 90% of the time, the barrier reef would be just a series of low hills, 70 metres high. The barrier reef's been killed off 60 times in the last 3 million years by having sea level drop up and down like a yo-yo. And it's still going up and down like a yo-yo, and it's likely to do that for the next 30 million years.
And the barrier reefs always regenerated itself when it's got
Yep.
the sea,
Yep.
of course.
Now, 15,000 years ago, because the seas got colder, they sucked down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is actually a very soluble gas in water. And there are pine needles from the La Brea tar pits in California which display symptoms of CO2 starvation, that the plants that we see and we rely upon to eat almost died out because of lack of carbon dioxide. In fact, the low was 186 parts per million about 15,000 years ago. Plant life dies off at 150 parts per million. Came within 30 parts per million of life above sea level dying off due to a lack of carbon dioxide. Now, what mankind has done, come along, we've dug up all these rocks for a little while, we've put a bit more carbon dioxide back in the atmosphere, but 98% of that is going to be sucked back down into the oceans over the next 800 years, and we'll say goodbye to it and we'll never see it again. And life on this planet will become far more difficult as the CO2 levels fall and as the glaciation comes back and scrapes civilization off the North American and European plates down to the level of Washington. No, the whole of Scandinavia is going to be scraped off and turned into rock dust somewhere south of the, north of the Alps, and that's the future.
So what can we do to plan our future accordingly with the future of the Earth, which is in cycles, as we said, as you pointed out? So what is coming and how soon is coming?
Well, actually, Tibor, we've been given a perfect planet to inhabit.
Yes.
If you look at the big scheme of things. And we've been a certain amount of fossil fuels to start civilization with, and we've been given a big lump of nuclear fuel to continue that civilization. But we've got to choose the right nuclear process, and it isn't burning U-235 as we currently do.
As usually, yes, as we're doing it. Yes.
It's going to thorium molten salt reactors and producing almost no waste, and a very safe process.
So the thorium is the one, which is the dust of thorium, is the future for nuclear energy.
Yep.
Which is just outlined for the audience who never heard about thorium.
13.5 billion years ago with the Big Bang, eventually the universe cooled down, suns formed, and eventually some of them blew up in supernovas. And during that moment of the supernova was creation of all the dense elements beyond iron, including thorium and uranium, which are the only, if I'm correct, they're the only, above iron, the only nuclear fuels available to us. But thorium's 4 times more available than uranium.
Uranium, yes.
It occurs as U-233. It's fertile but not fissile. So you have to add a neutron to each thorium atom to convert it into U-233. And then that U-233 can be fissioned and on through the process right to plutonium and so on. And it's intrinsically a lot safer process than trying to burn U-235.
However, you couldn't make nuclear bombs from the process.
No, actually, it's the perfect machine for making weapons-grade plutonium.
To build the thorium generators, is it more costly or less than the fusion
Less.
nuclear?
Oh, far, far cheaper than fusion, which may never work at all, because you're talking about millions of degrees centigrade in a confined little thing like this. And thorium molten salt reactors, you could build them like in the Boeing plant and just build one a day and set it out on a barge. The trouble with nuclear power at the moment is like building Ferrari out in a paddock. You get all these parts that you assemble from all over the world and you bring them. They've got to be very high quality, and everybody's signed off triple ticket and so on for these things. And you're trying to build something out in a paddock with people you've brought in just for a couple of years, and they're enormously expensive.
So why didn't we invest in the future? Apart from the Julie Gillard signed agreement with the Czech Republic, I think it was $15 million to invest in the thorium.
It's a whole moral bankruptcy of the Western scientific establishment. Anybody who believes in global warming is, as a scientist, is either evil or an idiot. And we haven't shrugged off that yet. The whole Australian Academy of Science is still down that road. They're ignoring the future. To my mind, they're just completely contemptible people. No one in the scientific establishment over East, in the Australian Academy of Sciences, says, well, David, we think you're a crackpot, but we'll take a lecture from you. No one's done that. They don't want to hear any dissenting opinion whatsoever.
We have to go for a short break, but David, we're coming back to talk to you about these issues of climate change, and please stay with us.